Hey guys, inside number 2, we're still in Matthew 5, and that's where the Sermon on the Mount is found. Sermon on the Mount, that's what it's called, that's where it's found. It's over a couple of chapters, and next week we'll do the other part of the Sermon on the Mount. But this particular insight, I'm looking at verses 13 to 16 of chapter 5. So it says, and you'll probably be familiar with these verses as well, because they are often quoted and quite well understood, but there are deeper meanings too. So let's have a look. It says, "Ye are the salt of the earth, but if the salt have lost its savour, wherewith shall it be salted? It is thenceforth good for nothing, but to be cast out and to be trodden under foot of men." And then in 14, "Ye are the light of the world, a city that is set on a hill cannot be hid." 15, "Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel. Put it on a candlestick, and it giveth light unto all that are on the house." But they shine it. So, in 16, and this is the one you'll know. "Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven." So, how are we salt and how are we light? Because the Lord's calling us here, Jesus is calling us here. First he calls us salt, and then he says you're light. And it's like, well, I could see how I might be light. That makes more sense to me. But how am I salt? Like, that's always sort of one that's not too understood. So let's look at this. So the people in this audience would have known that salt had a deeper meaning and connection to the law of animal sacrifice, which, remember, is in a similitude of what Christ is going to do through the atonement. So the salt needed to be good and to keep its savour to do its job, fulfill its purpose. And even today this principle and teaching stands true. Don't be contaminated salt. So I've got 2 salts here that I love. We're a big fan in our household of the Himalayan pink salt, and this is a nice fine shaker one. I do like the crunchier sprinkles, but this seems to go better on everything, and it's still quite chunky. So this is natural, unrefined, and additive free. So this is a good salt, and it has like it's been in our cupboard over. We've had a lot of humidity, so it's a bit clumped together. Still has excellent taste. And you will notice on the bottom, if you can see that, that's upside down. It does have a batch number and a best before date, which says end of January 2024. Because after that time, even though it doesn't really go off, it's not going to make you sick. It's just not going to do its job anymore. It's not going to be fit for purpose. So what the Lord's teaching here is, be fit for purpose. Don't be contaminated for a start. Like, get something that's a pure product. Be a pure product. But be fit for purpose. Got some on my fingers. Yummy. Nice. So, a good salt on something, really, really good. And that's why I bought this other one. So this is from Cornish sea salt. And this is called Really Garlicky. I like this one. It's imported from Britain, so if anyone's in Britain, hey guys, especially Cornwall, because this is where it comes from. This is imported into New Zealand and isn't cheap, but lasts quite a lot. And this particular one goes really good on avocado or toast. So I love that, but it enhances the flavour, which is the point. It is not contaminated. This is literally sea salt and garlic. So again, a really good salt. We keep the lid on it so it's not contaminated with anything and it's not going off. So that's how we salt. We give flavour to the world. We are salt. This says there, ye are the salt of the earth. But if you've lost your flavour, then there's no point anymore. So don't be that. Be the flavour of life. Be the goodness and as he says there, we're talking about here, that salt has a deeper meaning to like preserving and keeping something good, and it's got to be pure and fresh for that to work. So keep that in mind. How does that apply to you? Are you pure and fresh and bringing flavour to life, or are you kind of stagnant and need a bit of refreshing? Need to get back to that goodness, because you are. So that principle stands today. Now let's talk about light. How are you a light? What does this look like in your life right now? So remember that Bonnie H. Cordon talked about in conference General Conference like 3 years ago. I don't know, COVID screwed my mind clock, something wicked. She was talking about when she was a little girl and they had, I don't know if he was an apostle at the time, but he became an apostle visiting. And go out to somewhere, chicken coop or something, and make sure they're fed. And this visitor was like, oh, I'd like to do that because I had them when I was a kid too. That would make me really happy. So she grabs because it's gone dark by this point, so she grabs the torch, and I've got a little torch here. She would have had a bigger one. Puts that on, and there's the light. Woo, blinded. And she knew the way. So she's walking around with it swinging like that, And I should have looked up who the visitor was. It was someone that taught her a really good lesson. But anyway, he didn't know where he was going, so he walked through the ditch, got wet, missed the bridge, soaked, muddy shoes. She didn't realise this till they got back, and he didn't complain. But he did say to her, you need to focus the light for others to see, and that was the lesson. So there's the light. So how are you a light? How are you, because we don't really have candles. So back then they had candles, and that's what he's saying there. If you're going to be a candle, men don't light a candle. We don't light a candle or put a torch on and then cover it up. Because what's the point? If it's covered up, like a bushel's like a cover, like a cane basket cover. So I'm not going to put my torch on and then walk around like this, am I? In the dark. What's that going to do? Nothing. It's going to achieve a 0. But if I'm in the dark and I've got that on, which is not so good in the light, but, you can still shine it on my forehead and you can see the greasy forehead. This is going to tell me where to go. But you've got to focus it. You've got to focus the light. And this particular torch has got a couple of settings, which I like too. So, how are you a light? What does this look like in your life right now? How are you directing that light of Christ that you're born with? Because we're all born with that light of Christ, and then we're born in the most beautiful, perfect, lovely way. Even if there's something physically not correct with us being born, our spirits are perfectly perfect just as they are. And we're all born with the light of Christ. So as Sister Cordon taught, it was an April 20 General Conference, we need to focus this light so others may see the way to Christ. It's not just waving a light all over the world to make it brighter. So how do you focus your light and don't hide it? It's a really big thing. The quote from her talk is actually in the Come Follow Me manual. I can't remember if it's the teacher's one or the regular one. But she said, the Lord's invitation to let our light so shine is not just about randomly waving a beam of light and making the world generally brighter. Because that's quite easy to do. Just go out there and be happy, and people are generally happier because you're happier. But that's fleeting and doesn't last. And it's not really teaching them anything. It's just making them momentarily happier because you walked past and you were happy. And they're like, oh, that's nice, a happy person. And as soon as you're gone, it's gone, right? That feeling's gone. So it's about focusing our light so others may see the way to Christ. It is gathering Israel on this side of the veil, helping others see the next step forward and making and keeping sacred covenants with God. So it's about focusing that. So what are you doing for that right now? Now, for me right now, I teach this online. I'm hoping that's a light to people out there. I think it is. Some of the comments I get would indicate that. But there's many ways to do this. You can be a light to your family. Like, I'm the only member on one side of my family, and people are happy to come stay in my home. They're happy to have me in their home because I bring the light. And I focus that, and I will talk of Jesus, and I will talk Jesus to people who have no idea who he is, who don't believe in him. And I'm not pushy in it, but I'll bring it up, and I'll say, I'll say, oh, that was lucky, and I'm like, no, that was Jesus. And they're like, yeah, okay. But, it's still in their life, and they kind of love me for it. And as I said, it's not in an aggressive, pushy way. I'm still just me, and if you know me, I'm a bit of a nut, in a good way, But, it just, speaking about Christ, and that's why I called this account, We Rejoice and Speak of Christ, because that's what we need to be doing more often. And there's ways you can do that without being pushy and without overwhelming someone. It's reading the room and reading that person with what they need to hear. You can speak Jesus without even speaking his name. It's good to speak his name, but you can still speak his messages of love and kindness and hope without speaking his name. And you can teach people the principles of the gospel without telling them that's what they are. And that's still focusing your light, but it's about reading your audience and doing that. So have a think about how you're doing that. Instead of hiding it away, how are you focusing it on Christ and beaming it out there to really help people bring them to Christ and to Heavenly Father, and to get them on the pathway that they can find all these blessings that we talked of in the Beatitudes that Jesus had just talked about, that we talked about in insight number 1. So think about that and drop some comments. I want to know, how do you bring the light? How do you shine the light? Are you struggling right now? Are you a little flickering birthday candle, or are you like one of them big high beam lights? How are you feeling? Like, where are you fitting with this? Because very rarely am I more of a high beam light. Mostly I'm about this. That's about the extent of the energy I get, but like, I know the light is bright enough to bring others in. Sometimes it can be a flickering candle when I'm not well and I'm just not dealing. And sometimes when I walk out of like conference time, or I'm like had a really particularly good thing, I will be one of those big high beam lights, but that kind of energy doesn't usually stay for me. Mostly I'm a consistent, decent light to see at least the next 20 meters for 12 steps, and I think that's good. So how does that fit for you? What does that look like in your life? I want to know. Well, we all want to know, because it's going to help us, right? So drop comments, let us know. But yeah, that's that. So how are you salt? How are you light? Hope that helps. All right, stick around. We're going to go for insight number 3. See you there.